becoming a techno wizard, and today we're going to get back on our reading Anarchy Works series, I guess you can call it. So test it out. This it turns out this service Restream can serve to two places at once on the free service, so I can go to Twitter at the same time as YouTube. So we'll see if we get some more folks with that. If not, that's fine. I have no idea what it looks like. Let me see. Check real quick. Um, Let me see what it looks like here on my Twitter. Oh, it just says untitled. Yeah, I guess that didn't go very well, but it is what it is. It's a process. But we're going to jump right into this chapter here. On the last one, we talked about who will be the experts and the leaders and stuff like that, right? And they pointed out how the fact that you don't really need experts and leaders, or at least not as like the experts are people who simply do the work, and these a lot of hard, especially hard skills, can be learned over time if you just give people the chance to do so. Um, and Same thing for leaders. Like leaders are important to an extent, but they shouldn't be the authority per se, right? Leaders are usually people who are good at, maybe project management or something like that, or operations or things like that. Like they're good in that vertical of thing, but that doesn't mean that they should necessarily get the authority to say what every person should do, especially if other people are not volunteering, right, to actually follow them. So it was a great long chapter last time. Today we're going to get into we'll take out the trash. I already have some ideas about this. It's crazy because I was literally writing about this similar thing in my newsletter that's almost 50 pages long right now. So I'm gonna have to figure out what to do with that newsletter. But um, anyways, let's see what he's talking about here. If everyone is free to work as they choose, who would take out the trash or perform other undesirable jobs? Fortunately, in a localized anti capitalist economy, we could not externalize or hide the cost of our lifestyle by paying someone else to clean up after us. Yeah, that's a huge point right there, right? Um, and that by outsourcing who takes out the trash, what we're doing is hiding, our waste. It's like, we're not noticing how much poop we have in our toilets, by saying, oh, we're just gonna hide it away, right? Just because somebody else takes out your trash doesn't mean that's an efficient way of using waste. And we're actually seeing this huge problem today of the fact that most people don't even think about where waste goes, like what happens to trash afterwards after you put it in the trash. People just assume, oh, it's gone. I don't have to think about it anymore. But people that it doesn't just disappear, right? It gets put in landfills and all this other stuff. And so you're driving down the highway, have this terrible stench, and that's just all your trash just piled up in the hill somewhere. And it really is terrible. Um, but yeah, this is a great point right here. We would have to pay for the consequences of all our own actions, exactly, rather than paying China to take our toxic waste, for example. That's another great point. A lot of our trash is like we sell it. We don't even take care of it ourselves. We sell it to other countries, and they, usually try to reuse it, but a lot of them can't. Like there's this huge um, beach in South America, and I think it's Peru or something like that, where all the fashion nova stuff, like all the fast fashion stuff, it just gets dumped because most of it they try to sell it to these, South American countries, and most of it they can't use or they don't want to use, and it just gets dumped there on the beach. Think about that for a second. A whole beach just full of fast fashion, of just clothes that nobody can wear or wants to wear or whatever. And it's super toxic because a lot of processed clothes have a whole bunch of dyes and all sorts of chemicals made to starch it or for certain colors or whatever, and it's just seeping in to the beach. That means all those chemicals are going into the ocean. Just like all the microplastics that's going into the ocean, and now all of our food, all of our seafood, is full of microplastics. Even food that is not made in the ocean is full of microplastics because it uses the recycled water, such as apples. There's this study that shows that a whole lot of apples are full of microplastics that came from the ocean because it was evaporated into the air, rained down, and all that. It's a mess. It's a mess. It's terrible. um, if a necessary service like garbage disposal were being neglected, the community would quickly notice and have to decide how to handle the problem. Exactly. People could agree to reward such work with small perks, nothing that translates into power or authority, but something like getting to be first in line when exotic goods come into town, receiving a massage or a cake, or simply the recognition and gratitude for being a stand-up member of the community. Ultimately, in a cooperative society, having a good reputation and being seen by your peers as responsible are more compelling than any material incentives. Yes, this is a huge point. Like, this is how we became humans, is this pro-social abilities, this ability to care about what other people think about us, and to, form a reputation of trust and all this other stuff. All this was built upon pro-social abilities. And what we do when we create capital, right, when we create systems of authority, is we take away those social needs. Like, sure, you can have a leader who is like, generous or something like that, but they don't have to be generous. They don't have to be generous to everybody. They can just be generous to some people, and that creates a power differential. And some people sucking up to them and all this other stuff, and it just becomes really disgusting. So, the fact that we have like these social, um, you know, facts, things about our society is a strong portion of why we do what we do, and how we do what we do. Another point here is the fact that, like, this is something I pointed out in my newsletter, is like, when you take out the trash at your house, right? If you live with a family or with a group of friends, right? Usually you just figure out who's going to take out the trash, right? You just talk to each other and say, okay, on this day I take out the trash, or, when this is this amount I take it out, or, we each take it, whatever. You figure it out between yourselves, how you're going to do that, right? But we don't do that anymore with our communities. We just assume, we just say, oh, we'll buy a service and they'll take care of it. But that means that we're no longer thinking about how to come together and cooperate, with our community about how to dispose the trash or how to reuse certain elements of it, right? And that's another. I'm not sure if they'll get into this, but a lot of indigenous societies, right? A lot of, especially egalitarian societies, were inherently more sustainable because of things like this, where they cooperated about their waste, right? They realized that you had to be sustainable if you wanted to retain your lifestyle. You couldn't just, eat as much as you could and then throw it all away. No, you had to eat only so much that the the fruits or the meat will replenish itself naturally, right, over time. If you give it a season or 2 seasons, those stores will replenish, right? You had to actually think about this stuff because it wasn't in some supermarket. You Every time you took a berry off a bush, you realize, oh, there's less berries here. So I clearly can't just eat berries forever at all times of year. I can only eat berries here, at this time of year. And then next year there was no more berries, right? It's inherently more sustainable. Versus in today, we just assume, oh, we could just go to the store and buy berries, and there's no berries, then we get mad. Like, why don't you have berries? Blah, 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 blah. Some people be like, oh, it's not in season, obviously. But most people are just like, it's a sense of entitlement, thinking that it should always be there. And we don't think about how it gets there or why or where it goes after. It really is no wonder that we're falling apart, because our lifestyle is inherently unsustainable. Or the community could decide that everyone should involve themselves in these tasks on a rotating basis. Exactly what I said. An activity like garbage collection does not have to define anyone's career in an anti-capitalist economy. Exactly. Right. When you pitch in, everybody, it's not, no one person is the garbage person. Everybody just pitches in, and then therefore everybody has a hand in the situation, right? So the things that nobody really wants to do, you just cooperate so that everybody does a little bit of it. So nobody really complains as much. Everybody's just like, okay, it's just everything, we just do together. Necessary tasks no one wants to perform should be shared by everyone. Exactly. So instead of a few people having to sort through garbage their entire lives, everyone was who was physically able would have to do it for just a couple hours each month, right? And it's not even have to do it, right? Because this is the key thing. People will be like, "Oh, you're gonna force people." I thought you were against coercion. No, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to force people. You just cooperate, right? And if you don't want to cooperate, then people don't have to associate with you, right? But okay, you don't want to help, then I I'm not gonna mess with you. And then later on, you're gonna be like, oh man, they have something I want, right? This is what makes social relationships so important, social organization, social skills so important, is realizing that you can't just be completely transactive, right? You can't just demand or feel entitled about what should be apparent or what should be there for you. You have to be in this constant negotiation, this dance with other people, of realizing that sometimes you do things that you don't really want to do, but you do it voluntarily because you know that later on you're going to need them, right? Or you're gonna want their help. You're gonna, want to talk with them. You're their friend, right? There's so many areas in our life where we do things that we don't actually want to do, but we don't mind doing it because we're doing it together, or we're doing it for a purpose or whatever, right? So this is a huge point. This is a huge point right here. And that's something that we don't really recognize as much anymore, when people assume that, oh, without capitalism, without markets, then people aren't going to do the bad things or the hard things. Like, no, that's literally not what humans have done for 300,000 years. Like, it's completely against what history has shown that we actually do. um Goodness. The Christiania Free State is a quarter in Copenhagen, Denmark, that has been squatted since 1971. Wow, that's a long time. It's at least for like a squatting thing. It's 800. It's 850 inhabitants, are autonomous within their 85 acres. They have been taking out their own trash for over 30 years. The fact that they receive about 1 million visitors a year makes their achievement all the more impressive. A million visitors? Let me look this up, because that sounds like the move. Freetown Christian. Oh, looks nice. You see? Look at that. Look at that. Wow. That's that character, right? This is what's so annoying about a lot of, these kind of mass-produced cities nowadays that we have, where we just, oh yeah, buy a house, whatever. It's just nobody's building houses, nobody's creating our own houses. We don't have this character anymore, right? We don't have these unique flavors of our towns and our cities and our environments, because it's all just mass-produced. And this is beautiful, right? Like, imagine each city, each town has their own type of artwork and architecture and all this other stuff. And every time you go to a new place, it's like a new adventure. Oh man, that's so cool. That's on my list right there. I gotta check that out one day when I get to traveling around. Um, a million visitors. Where was I here? Makes a Gmail. Okay. The streets, buildings, restaurants, public toilets, and public showers are all reasonably clean, especially for hippies. The hippies are supposed to be clean or whatever. I guess I don't know. That was before my time. The body of water that runs through Christiania is not the cleanest, but considering that Christiania is tree covered and automobile free, one suspects most of the pollution comes from the surrounding city that shares the waterway. Exactly. That's the right. Residents have built dozens of the houses now standing in Christiania using innovative eco designs. They also use solar power, wind power, composting, and a whole host of other eco-friendly innovations. A method of filtering sewage through reed beds, which means water coming out of Christiania is as clean as that coming out from the rest of Copenhagen's treatment plants, has helped the commune to be shortlisted for a Pan-Scandinavian Award for ecological living. That's amazing. Beautiful. Different people. I'm curious if anybody's watching this later on. I would love to see in the comments. Do you know of any other free cities like this, free states like this? I would love to know, because this is amazing. I would love to put together like a directory of these places, visit them, and see how they're doing and stuff like that. Different People interviewed had different conceptions of how Christianity was kept clean, suggesting a sort of dual system. A newcomer said that you clean up after yourself, and when you felt like doing some extra picking up, you did. An old time resident who was more involved in decision making explained there was a garbage committee answerable to the common meeting, responsible for the bottom line of keeping Christianity clean, though clearly voluntary assistance and cleanliness by all the residents was the first line of defense. Indeed, beautiful stuff. I'm going to go into the next section because this was pretty short, and that one's short too. So, who would take care of the elderly and disabled? Only in a society with what is euphemistically termed a highly competitive market are elderly people and disabled people so marginalized. Exactly. People, I don't know why, but for some reason, people have this idea that older cultures used to just kill their old people or just kick the disabled people out. But when you as soon as you look into like any sort of history or any sort of archaeology, you see completely the opposite. Like most egalitarian, at least egalitarian places, right? You can't just pick out any hunter gatherer society, because some hunter gatherer societies were patriarchal or matriarchal, or they were just not egalitarian. Look at the ones that were actually egalitarian, who actually had free, equality between the sexes and ages and all this other stuff. They cared, right? They didn't kick their elderlies out. They used them. They were a part of the community. Disabled people, they were a part of the community. They took care of them. They even had highly respectful burial, funeral arrangements and all this other stuff. And you can see this in the history, everything from some parts of the Viking community to some parts of the Hausa, the Native American, all these other people. Like, it's amazing that throughout history, for hundreds of thousands of years before we had any science or medicine to take care of these people, they were taken care of. Like, I saw this article the other day where they showed an archaeological dig that showed that this one disabled person or elderly person, or maybe they were both, like, they lost their teeth 10 or so years ago. Like, before they died, they lost most of their teeth years before they actually died, meaning somebody had to chew up their food for them, because this was hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? People had to chew up their food for them to help them eat, for them to have survived, years after they lost their teeth. Right, this is evidence that people cared for their disabled and elderly people in these cultures where they didn't have capitalism, or the best of resources or whatever. So the argument that you need capitalism or some other statist type of thing in order to help elderly people or disabled people is completely bunk. And if anything, you see more like destruction and, or rather more callous, treatment of elderly and disabled people today in capitalist environments, precisely because they're not competitive, right? Because they're not valuable. They don't provide value to the economy, and so they kind of just put off to the side. um, Amar says, "Hello, I agree it would be silly to not take care of the elderly. They would be respected for their life, wisdom, and bonds with others." Exactly, Amar. Thank you. Thank you. And many societies, recognize that. Many societies recognize that. They treated their elderly highly respectfully. In fact, many children were brought up chiefly by the elders, who would tell stories of their own experiences and do so in really interesting ways. That's how we got a lot of myths. And you had like the griots and many African cultures, all these different places. They had the elderly, just were highly respected. People love to sit down and listen to the elders tell their stories by the fireside and things like that. And today, most people don't even want to talk to elderly people. So it's really flipped around. In order to increase profit margins, employees avoid hiring people with disabilities and force older workers into early retirement. Yep. The fact that we even have retirement is another problem. When workers are compelled to move frequently in search of jobs, in a culture in which the rite of passage to adulthood is moving into your own house, parents are left alone as they age. Yeah, this is something that was really hard for me growing up to think about, because I come from a Haitian, background, and we don't put our elderly in an older home or put them in their own house. No, like, they live with you. Right? And I think many immigrants, many people from other countries outside of America do the same thing, where we take care of our older people, right? They live with us, enter old age. And so the idea of putting your people in a retirement home, That's terrifying to me. Like I used to help my mom. She was a nurse. I used to, help her at these retirement homes, and I was just like, what? What? You telling me you put your grandma and your grandpa in these places and it's just full of their own, it's terrible, like it smells terrible. No one visits these people. They feel like it's just so sad, man. And that's normal. I'm just like, ugh. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely, man. Most eventually move most eventually move into whatever kind of retirement facility they can afford. Many die neglected, alone, and indignant, perhaps with bed sores and diapers that have not been changed in 2 days. Exactly, man. It's terrible. It's disgusting. In an anarchist, anti-capitalist world, the social fabric would not be so coarse. Exactly, man. You actually care for people, take care of them. In a plethora of experiments that arose in Argentina in response to the crisis of 2001, the economics of solidarity and care for all members of society flourished. The economic collapse in Argentina did not lead to the dog eat dog scenario that capitalists fear. Rather, the result was an explosion of solidarity, and the elderly and disabled have not been left out of this web of mutual aid. And participating in the neighborhood assemblies, elderly and disabled people in Argentina got a chance to secure their own needs and represent themselves in the decisions that would affect their lives. At some assemblies, participants suggested that those who own their own houses withhold their property tax and instead give that money to the local hospital or other care facilities. In parts of Argentina with severe unemployment, movements of unemployed workers have effectively taken over and are building new economies. In general, Moscone, an oil town in the north, unemployment is above 40%, and the area is largely autonomous. The movement has organized over 300 projects to see people's needs, including those of the elderly and disabled. Beautiful stuff. Even in the absence of stored wealth or fixed infrastructure, stateless hunter gatherer societies really take care of all the members of their community, regardless of whether they are economically productive. In fact, grandparents, genetically useless from a Darwinist point of view, since they are past the age of reproduction, are a defining characteristic of humankind going back millions of years. Exactly. Millions. So they didn't even go back hundreds. This is millions. This is before we were humans, and this is a great point. uh, do I need to go on? Like, and a fossil record from the beginning of our species shows that the elderly were cared for. Exactly. Modern hunter gatherers demonstrate not only material care for the elderly, but also something that is invisible in the fossil record: respect. The Mabuti, I love the Mabuti. They're amazing, amazing people to look up. Look them up. For example, recognize five age groups: infants, children, youth, adults, and elders. And of these, only the adults carry out significant economic production in the form of gathering and hunting or collecting raw materials like wood. Yet social wealth is shared by all, regardless of their productivity. It would be unthinkable to let the elderly or disabled starve simply because they do not work. Likewise, the Mabuti include all members of the society in making decisions and participating in political and social life, and the elderly play a special role in conflict resolution and peacemaking. Exactly. Beautiful stuff. Love to know what you learned from this and what you think about this stuff. It really does boggle my mind when people say, "Oh, without capitalism, without states, you won't have people protecting elderlies and disabled." I'm like you just don't read books. Like you clearly don't even know your history, saying stuff like that. Um, and you can just look around to see exactly what we think about elderly people in a capitalistic, state focused society. Like if we really want to have a better society, we have to open up, build actual communities, and focus on the community building, right? And that means these generally smaller, spaces. The whole idea of having a nationwide community of millions of people or even billions is completely like silly. Like it doesn't really make sense, because you can't talk to a million people, right? You have no idea what that even. You can't even fit a million people into your brain, right? This is why you have Dunbar's number. Granted, there is some, space in there. It's not exactly a couple 150 or whatever the number is. It actually uh, ranges quite widely to a couple five to maybe 500, maybe even to a couple thousand, depending on the type of technology, the type of relationships that you use. But it doesn't go up to 100,000 or a million, right? We should have communities of max a couple thousand, and then just have them interspersed throughout the world. We don't need freaking a nation of millions of people where automatically you force everybody to follow these rules and these regulations and all this other stuff, because you don't actually care about, with that on that scale, you no longer really care about the wants and the needs of the individuals anymore, right? It's all about the larger powers at play. And when it comes to specialization with skills or taking care of people, eh, you have to have a sense of community. If you don't have that sense of community, then none of this works, right? This is exactly why we have so many problems of today, because we don't have that sense of community anymore, right? People don't really care. It's very transactive, very isolating. Most of us don't have more than barely even have 5 friends, close friends that we can actually talk to and feel connected with. Most of us don't have that. Most of us don't even talk to our families every day. Most of us live very isolated lives. So I find it really, I don't know, just ridiculous that people can look at how we live today and say that this is the best we can do. It's not. Amar says, I really resonate with the way you think, not just your reasoning, but your emotional intelligence as well. Great commentary. Thank you, Amar. I really appreciate it. This is why I do this, because I think it's just important to have these sorts of conversations more, and to read this stuff. Because like growing up, like I was a person that I said this before in my other episodes, but I was a person that's like, oh yeah, we can fix capitalism, right? And then early on in my channel, in this channel, you will see I wanted to be a trillionaire. Like this started out with me wanting to be the first trillionaire. Like I'm gonna win capitalism. Like I'm gonna figure this stuff out. I'm gonna invent things and make a business and all this other stuff. But the more I learned, the more I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense, right? If I want to change the world, if I want to make the world a better place, capitalism is gonna do it, right? And the more you're able to actually be employ critical thinking and emotional intelligence and look at how we live life, you're like, making a business and making a bunch of money is not going to solve the problem, right? If it was, then all the money that we have today would have solved the problem. Like it's a mess. Toas says, I think the tradition for caring for old folks came from the oral constraints of passing down knowledge. Do you think modern communication has an influence on how they are treated currently? Oh, that's an interesting take right there. That's an interesting take. I want to say no, because because again, it's important to realize that elderly people, it's not like we didn't regard them as a sense of value, right? I think the problem with this sort of thinking it this that way is that it assumes that we only care for elderly people because of their experiences that they can give, right? When I said earlier that people, respected, elderly people and sat down and listened to their stories, that wasn't the only reason why they cared about elderly people, right? Because there were plenty of elderly people who like couldn't talk, like the person who had no teeth and couldn't really, communicate and things like that. They probably didn't have any stories to tell, or they probably didn't have an easy way of communicating their knowledge or things like that. And when you look at like the funerals of people, of these older societies, there are plenty of people who died, like who didn't have teeth, or who probably weren't able to communicate, because you can actually see, like, they had some skull damage, or they probably had some mental problems and things like that. But still, they were buried with like crazy cool, like, resources in their burial. Like people spent a lot of time and effort to bury these people, despite the fact that they probably didn't like um didn't have value, right, to the community. So the truth is that I don't think that passing on knowledge is the reason why elderly people were respected. It was just because we, as social creatures, right, learned to value people just for being people, right? We created these social kind of coalitions. Like if you could look up the female coalitions, female cosmetics coalitions theory. That's a theory of evolution that says, the reason that we evolved intelligence and sentience is because of coalitions of females coming together to form social bonds, right? And they were able to raise their children together and trust their children with other mothers, right? That's very. I don't think you see that anywhere else in the animal kingdom where a female would trust their child to another female or to another animal to protect. No other animal does do that. We do, because we form these coalitions. So I think it's really the social bonds that made us value elderly people or anybody else. And yours says comfort words. I don't know what you're talking about, but okay. Could form a whole sentence there, so we can have a conversation. But yeah, like this is a lot of there's a lot of interesting stuff here, and the more you realize how important socializing is with humans, the more you realize how far we've fallen today due to the fact that we don't have these social bonds and the social cohesion anymore. And I think that's the most important aspect of all this is to have that social cohesion. But I'll end it there at 30 minutes now. I don't want to go too long because tomorrow I'm gonna do a episode on Hegel, and that one's probably going to be an hour or so, and then we'll get back to this on Friday probably. But thanks as always for listening, and thank you all for sharing your thoughts and having a conversation here. Real quick, Amar says, oh, he's answering Toaz. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Toaz Toes. Amar says, I enjoy caring for those before me out of appreciation and consideration for their needs. It also hurts to see those who came before no longer be able to care for themselves like before. So empathy. Exactly. Yeah. Empathy is a huge, factor of this. We kind of kind of misuse that term empathy today to kind of mean like, oh, you just, you look at people when you care for them. But empathy is a real feeling. It's like a feeling of actually like a visceral understanding, a connection between, you and somebody else, where even though you know that they have experienced something different, you kind of viscerally feel their pain or their even their happiness, right? You kind of have some sort of physiological reaction to how they feel and what they're thinking. Maybe it's the eyes, maybe it's the chemicals, maybe it's the body language, the tone. I don't know. It could be a number of things, but you viscerally feel connected to somebody based on how they're feeling. And yeah, I think what Mar says is true here. Like we feel a lot of that when we look at older people. Like, dang, you were probably like me once, and you were very fit. You were able to move around and do all this stuff, and now you can't. That must suck. So let me bring you in. Let me give you some love. Let me hear what you have to say. Let me give you some some connection, right? So yeah, Omar says, thanks for doing this kind of work. No problem, man. Thanks for watching this. Thanks for conversing with me. Usually nobody, talks, so it's cool to have some folks being a part of this conversation. That's what I really love, and I hope this channel grows to have more of that, because I think we need more of this in the world. And you yourself, feel free to do this sort of thing on your own channels or whatever. Let me know if you do, and I'll pop in as much as I can. We definitely need more of these conversations out here, because there's so much information, so much love, so much socializing that needs to happen, and I'm excited to do so. So yeah. Anyways, let me end for real, and thanks again for listening. Thanks again for participating. If you're watching this later, feel free to put in the comments. I will respond. And yeah, have a great day and have a great life. And see you. Bye bye.